Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. All right, here we go. Lots to cover here. First, I want to get into the eclipse stuff. It was pretty awesome. That's putting it mildly. But there's a number of different things around it that I just wanted to kind of briefly cover here right at the very top. I've got a few geopolitical things to bring up after that. Plenty of education things to dive into. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that there's some rather, I would say, telling signs, certainly numeric signs that, of course, the education system is collapsing. Not only is one of them the collapse of colleges and universities and a lack of enrollment, but our Virginia professor friend has sent me something here from Inside Higher Ed, and it really has to do with the lack of students, again, a dwindling number of them, certainly, a rather large percentage, not filling out federal aid forms anymore. But I'll definitely get into that a little bit later. Yeah. And then one rather ironic jab thing. In fact, a couple of rather ironic jab things, and perhaps a trend to pay attention to regarding the so-called diagnosis of what occurs among the jabs, specifically regarding blood clots. There seems to be certainly a trend occurring here. With a very specific diagnosis, which, again, I alluded to in the last episode and brought up specifically regarding Lauren Boebert. So, yeah, apparently all the doctors are reading their emails regarding this particular diagnosis, and I bet this particular diagnosis has skyrocketed. Again, it's not just blood clotting, but it's a rather specific name. Okay, so with that said, eclipse stuff. First of all, it was far cooler than what I could possibly imagine. It was very neat, without a doubt. Certainly a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And again, allegedly, there's going to be another one, 2044? And I believe the path is supposed to go over Montana this time. So, anyway, stick around for 2044 if you want to see another one. But with that said, almost out of the gate on Monday, it was remarkably interesting again. I woke up and the skies were crystal clear blue and everything was fine, and then bam, just like that, chemtrails everywhere. And they were flooding the sky. And I have to tell you, it was the worst chemtrail day that I have ever seen in my entire life. I've seen some bad ones, no doubt, but this one took the taco. In fact, I was driving around town briefly, and again, a lot of people walking around, of course, and a number of cars moving around, and the police too. The police presence was weird. It was just basically cops doing circles. In particular, I would say certainly around the general uptown area, but you could see them traveling in packs, which was interesting because, again, that's not something you typically see. But either way, as I was hitting intersections, I would just look up and I mean, the chemtrail planes were just everywhere. One of them, again, was just clearly hosing the skies. And it was clearly, of course, not natural cloud cover whatsoever. So I don't think that was an accident by any stretch. Again, I've got one thing here that I want to read about it that someone posted online. It's a possibility, certainly, but it certainly has to do with jabbed individuals and spraying the skies and what impact that could have on the jabbed individuals. But, excuse me, I've seen some videos on YouTube, again, of individuals specifically covering the chemtrails from Monday. And, I mean, they're not wrong. And they're showing the satellite footage, so to speak, and the infrared footage. And you can see the crisscrossing patterns all the way from the northern Mexico border, Texas border, all the way up to Maine. And it was just massive. I mean, there were just chemtrails throughout the entire path. So I think I brought it up on the show earlier, certainly in a previous episode where, again, we ran through a scenario where you get all these people outside looking up, staring at the sun with their mouths wide open. And, what a perfect opportunity to spray people with God knows what, and then make them sick and make them ill. And again, certainly, when you take the jabs into account, that brings in a whole nother level, because with a compromised immune system and ruined DNA, regardless of what you're spraying, it's probably not going to be good for them, one way or another. So one of the things that I've of course done in the past here on this show is I've read those specific peer-reviewed articles that have actually been published in medical journals and other journals, of course, where they've openly discussed aerosolizing vaccination and aerosolizing potential graphene oxide, of course, along with endless other poisons. Now, we know what comes out of the chemtrails. It's not good. I mean, it's lithium, barium, strontium, and a bunch of other stuff that, of course, aluminum clearly, that we have no business breathing. And yes, some of it's for weather modification, of course, and some of it is just to straight up poison us and make us sick. But with that said, yesterday's event, again, and the heavy, heavy spraying could not have been an accident. It was like all the chemtrail pilots just got their orders and up they went. And they were flying at multiple different altitudes. I mean, they were not so high that you could hardly see them. They were low. Some of these planes were flying low and gassing people like nobody's business. But I came across this post just before I started recording, and I thought, well, I'll read this. Again, it's food for thought. It's something to consider, certainly. And again, I'm taking a rather middle-of-the-road approach to this. Again, there are a lot of truths in this, without a doubt. But let me just read this very quickly. It was titled April 8th, 2024 was a timed event, quote unquote. It says, during the lunar eclipse on April 8th of 2024, the skies covering the entire eclipse pathway were littered with what is referred to as chemtrails. Now, before I keep reading, I also hope, it is my hope anyway, that during the eclipse day, of course, that just took place, that individuals were looking up in the sky and going, wow, look at all these planes. And hopefully they were asking themselves some questions like, geez, look at all the stuff coming out of the back of those wings of those planes. Is this normal? It was beyond obvious, again, that it's not natural. But either way, this continued, this particular post, and it said, these chemtrails were thicker than normal and seemed to fall towards Earth. If pangolin coronavirus isolate, PCOV underscore GX-PV2, or GXPV2, was aerosolized in the chemtrail streams, then about 200 million plus Americans just got infected by simply being outside viewing the eclipse. Again, you can take it with a grain of salt, but I'm going to keep going here. It says pangolin coronavirus isolate. Again, I don't think first of all, there are no viruses, and it hasn't been isolated, but if we're talking about a poison, that's something different. And I'm assuming that's what they're referring to here. But it says GXPV2 is only dangerous to the COVID-19 vaccinated people. GXPV2 was designed utilizing a gain of function that readily attaches to human ACE2 receptors located all over our bodies. Non-COVID vaccinated people may experience a mild cold lasting only a day or two. COVID vaccinated people had their DNA altered by the mRNA, modRNA, or DNA, rDNA, depending on which COVID vaccine they took. It says all COVID vaccines were gene therapy designed to make the immune system stand down to attacks via a permanent state of IgG4, immunoglobulin 4 related disease, which, again, I've also brought up on the show before. It says this is how the elites ensure they don't die during United Nations Agenda 2021, the depopulation agenda, that commenced operations December 1st of 2019 via the fake COVID pandemic designed to scare humans into taking the COVID vaccines that alter their DNA, forcing their immune systems to basically vanish over a 3 to 5 year period from January of 2021 to December of 2025. The knockout punch was the aerosolized deliverance of GXPV2 witnessed today, April 8th, 2024. It then wraps up and it says, between April 8th, 2024 and April 17th, 2024, we will witness hospitals nationwide filling to capacity and most likely global lockdowns to contain the contagion, quote unquote. Every COVID vaccinated person will be infected with this highly contagious GXPV2 that carries a 100% kill ratio. Today we witnessed the true beginning of the end, unquote. Now look, I'm not quite that panicked about that post. Okay, I don't know who wrote it. It was just bouncing around on Twitter, and I saw it on Godlike Productions, and I thought, okay, I've seen it a couple of places now. I'll at least read it. I would simply say that, based on the things that we know, it's beyond evident again that if they wanted to gas us, they could. Certainly, I think that goes without saying. They could certainly do it from airplanes. Again, they were doing it heavily on Monday. It was beyond obvious. And it was evident, again, that they were using the opportunity because they knew that people would be outside. Again, it was nice weather. It was in the 70s in Southwest Ohio here. It was very pleasant, minus, of course, all of the aerosolized spraying. But there's just a lot of questions here. That's really about all I can say. I'm not going to date fag and say, well, this is definitely going to happen, and you heard it there on that post, so it's definitely going to happen, and there's going to be lockdowns and blah, blah, blah. I'm certain, however, that, as I've discussed here on the show before, that I bet they want some kind of a lockdown in the future, and they certainly want to scare people again with some kind of an illness. But whether or not the people believe it or not is another matter. And again, given the fact that it's springtime right now and the weather is improving on a daily and weekly basis, I think selling another illness to the American people is going to be a tough sell. Again, with something like this, from an observational standpoint, I would basically just say it's worth observing. It's just worth observing whether or not you start to hear, within the next few weeks of individuals becoming ill. Particular workplaces where you're hearing of individuals taking time off because they're sick. Again, if a person listens to this show and they're working in a hospital, take a measurement of the number of people that are there now, and then of course take a measurement of the number of people that you see on a day in and day out basis over the next 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, again, if you see an uptick in all of those things, absences, illness, reports of illness, anecdotal or not, if it's happening and it can be measured, then it's worth recording. Again, it could have just been a test run. But even with a test run like that, why would you do that? What would be the purpose of, what exactly are you trying to test? So, I don't know. I don't know about any of it, but again, if an individual listening to this is in the medical profession, or you're a nurse or a doctor, and you're awake and you know what's going on, this would be a perfect opportunity to basically, stick a flag in the ground and say, okay, here's our starting point. Now let's start to pay attention from this moment forward and see what we see. Again, I have no doubt that they want to aerosolize things in order for us to become more ill, and certainly, of course, to trigger the weakened immune systems of the jabbed. But using an event like that, let's face it, government is evil and they want us dead. And using an event like Mondays would certainly be an opportunity to do that. So I don't know. Like I said earlier, if you're in a working environment with a great deal of people, now would be a decent time to pay attention to attendance and illness and just record that if you can. And if you see an uptick, well, then there might be a correlation there. That's all. Okay. Anyway, I, of course, am hoping for the best. I don't want people to just start dropping dead. Again, I'm not a lunatic, but, government certainly is, and we got to pay attention to their moves and what they want to do. Speaking of which, just very quickly, I just want to remind everybody that this so-called WHO pandemic treaty is allegedly supposed to be either approved or adopted, or however you want to phrase it, sometime next month. I believe the end of next month, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure the closer that we get to the end of May, the panic is going to sort of ramp up a little bit, and certainly the frequency of the stories regarding the pandemic treaty are going to ramp up a little bit, and I think that right there proves that we are the news. That we have the ability and the numbers in order to grab onto a story like that and an event like that and read through the paperwork as I have here on the show, and then, of course, present this to people and then have individuals chew on this for quite some time, and then again mark it on their calendars and basically say, okay, here's what the enemy has planned on this particular day or, around this particular time. So anyway, The closer we get to that, I'm sure I'll end up bringing it up far more frequently in the future. Let's see. Two more things, just kind of house cleaning things here. Stu Peters the other day, along with the bare knuckle boxer King Bao, were sitting on a couch and they had a debate with a Christian who I believe is a Christian pastor, and he's this older guy on the right, and then a Jewish individual, both who claim to be conservatives, who is sitting on the left on the screen. And they moderate this discussion basically about Christianity and Judaism and world events and Jewish control in government and a number of other things. It really is fascinating. There's moments in it when I was just laughing out loud. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's long. It's just under 3 hours long. I fully understand someone doesn't want to watch it. I fully get it. But it's, I mean, my take on debates. I'm not a fan of them because, again, you usually have somebody's telling the truth, somebody's not. Somebody doesn't want to believe the truth when it's being told. Sometimes the person who's telling the truth doesn't have the full picture. And, sometimes they're telling partial truths because they just don't know any better. And it basically, again, just sort of becomes this kind of ridiculous back and forth one way or another. But it was highly entertaining, the parts that I saw. I'm going to finish it a little bit later. But I will link it in the description below if you're interested in checking that out. Again, it's rather interesting. Because, again, one of the interesting parts, I think, about certainly Zionists, I would say, or individuals who are Jewish, is that if you ask them very basic questions, they do not want to provide you the answer. Either because, again, they don't want to admit particular answers and particular facts, or whatever it may be. But certainly from a historic perspective and a government perspective and a lobbying perspective, I mean, they really don't. So they'll very heavily use the term CCP and the Chinese Communist Party, but yet they skip over the fact that the Chinese were not communists. Someone taught them to be communists. And again, who taught them to be communists? Well, as it turns out, it was the inventors of communism, which happened to be the Bolsheviks and Jews. So there's that. But again, it's an interesting back and forth, and there's some ridiculous parts of it without a doubt. But either way, you give these individuals enough rope and enough length, they'll hang themselves pretty much with their own words and with their own hypocrisy. And that's kind of what Stu Peters does, is he just lets these two guys just kind of talk, and their ignorance just sort of rises to the top a little bit. So, and that's putting it mildly. But either way, I'll link that in the description below if you're interested in checking that out. Okay. One more thing here. You remember in the last episode I brought up situational awareness. And again, being vigilant and these social situations that are quite frequently either described or caught on camera, and then you get to observe other people doing what they're doing or what they're not doing in many cases. There was another one that was making the rounds on the internet the other day, and I put it in the last war video, so you can go back and check it out. In fact, it's the first video in the video portion of the war videos. And it's a black guy, probably an illegal, and he's in some country. I don't know what country it is, but it looks like a foreign country. And he's assaulting a white guy with Down syndrome at what looks like a train station. And there's some people standing around, and no one's doing anything. And it's evident that the black guy is trying to steal the white guy with Down syndrome. He's trying to steal his watch. So he's grabbing his arm and he's trying to rip the watch off or whatever he has on his wrist, whether again it be a watch or a bracelet or something. And he's just manipulating this guy around, and he's a younger guy. But either way, you watch a video like this again, and people are just standing around doing nothing. They're just letting it happen. Again, this is the part of all of this that is beyond disturbing to me. And I also came across another video also, which again, I think answers a particular question that some people might have in their minds, that if they find themselves in a situation like this where something like this is happening, the number of people, of course, that just stand around and do nothing is over flippin' whelming, which is awful. But there was a guy, and he was describing gun ownership and then carrying a gun, and more specifically, the percentage breakdown of what happens when an individual is carrying a gun and how just carrying a gun can de-escalate a particular situation. Now, I'm going to get the statistics wrong on this, but what he did say is that brandishing your firearm without actually firing it, even just showing it, like lifting up your shirt or wherever your holster is and just showing people that you have a gun, can almost, it was the vast majority of situations, de-escalate any kind of a conflict. That the individual or two individuals who are tussling or whatever it may be, if eye contact is made on the firearm by the aggressor, then the individual will stop. And this, I believe, was the case in, like, I don't know, I'm making this up, but it was something like 54% of all situations. And then it said ultimately, as he continued to sort of work his way through grabbing the gun and then pointing the gun and then pulling the trigger, that the closer you got to that, the percentage decreased in the number of times that actually occurs. That the vast majority of shootings that take place in self-defense are somewhere like 12%. Whereas, again, violent situations de-escalate 54+% of the time just by showing a person a gun. Now, what's interesting, and you probably know this if you've ever gone through the concealed carry training like I have, and you carry a gun like I do. Certainly, this was the case in Ohio, and I remember this from the training. In fact, it could actually be state law. It says something like, or at least they said in the training, which I thought was ridiculous, but they basically said that you should never brandish your gun unless you're prepared to use it. And if you're prepared to use it, you need to shoot to kill. So, again, it makes you wonder, like, wait a minute. if I'm walking around with a tool on my person for self-defense, and there's a situation clearly where there are clear aggressors, I should say, and someone is being victimized, and you brandish your gun, that you can go to jail for just brandishing your gun without even pulling the trigger or killing anybody. I find that ridiculous. In fact, I almost don't believe it. I mean, it's so preposterous. Certainly when individuals are attacking another individual or whatever the situation may be, I just don't believe that. I do believe that brandishing a gun and showing it to someone would deter someone from engaging in a crime further. Very famously, I remember this clip that was making the rounds on the internet a number of years ago. It was maybe 2 years ago. It was a guy in downtown Chicago. And he's around the skyscrapers, and he's a white guy, seemingly, and he's right up against the window, these big windows of what looks like a restaurant or something along those lines. And he's being assaulted by, I believe, at least 2 black teenagers. If you've seen this clip, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the white guy, again, he's older, and he's being beaten by these 2 black teenagers. And he brandishes his gun, and he pulls it out, and he points it right at both of them, and both of them take off. One of them took off running, and the other one walked away. While inside the building, as this was being recorded, people were screaming. They were like, "No, don't shoot him, don't shoot him." And he basically just walked toward them with his gun pointed right at him. And that stopped the situation. So again, they didn't know he had a gun. They were trying to rob him. They were trying to do whatever they were doing. And of course, he had a gun. So if they'd have gotten a hold of the gun, what would have happened to him? Now, again, should he have shot him? Well, he could have. He would have been within his rights. He was legally carrying a gun. They were assaulting him. He was in fear for his life. So he could have pulled the trigger and killed them both and, again, been within his rights. But this whole business of you can't brandish a gun or else you'll go to jail kind of thing, I just don't buy that. I really don't. So the reason that I mention that is I want to get back to the train station situation. In the train station situation, again, if you see that video and you're saying to yourself, well, he was a tall, strong black guy. He was assaulting this kid with Down syndrome. I mean, he looked like an adult with Down syndrome, but either way, what could I do in that situation? I mean, I'm only this tall, or I'm only this big, or I'm not that strong, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Well, if you carry a gun, brandish it. Again, if that's a European country, which it appeared to be, in many European countries, of course, you can't carry a gun, which is absurd, which is why they have the problems that they have. And of course, we have the problems that we have because Americans don't want to exercise their Second Amendment right, and God only knows why. They've been pacified to not do it, I suppose. But at least more people are doing it in America today than I think ever before, certainly. And anyway, I mean, that right there is a perfect example of when, if you don't feel like you're strong enough to actually take the person to the ground, because it didn't appear that they were armed in this video. They were just using their hands and using their body weight to try to, again, rob this guy. But if you didn't want to shoot him right then and there, brandish the gun. So again, it's not a matter of, not being big enough or strong enough or well equipped physically in order to de-escalate a situation. That's why firearms exist. They exist to defend ourselves from aggressors. And there's lots of ways of doing that, and lots of situations, again, where brandishing a gun can de-escalate a situation, certainly, as I just described, in one where maybe you don't have, the hand-to-hand combat training in order to end a particular situation like that. But yeah, again, it's just another visual situation, and I'm going to keep finding these videos, of course, and I'm going to keep putting them on the war videos because I want people's blood pressure to increase. And I want you to physically put yourself in a situation like that so that you can imagine what you would do. Because again, it's just heartbreaking watching these individuals in these situations just stand by and do absolutely nothing. It's ridiculous. In fact, I'll give you another quick example. I saw one just the other day. It was, again, a black guy. It looked like it was in Paris, France, and there's a bunch of white people standing around, and they're all sitting down also at this outside restaurant, and they're all eating. And randomly, there's this black illegal, and he starts banging on a table, and he starts, throwing glasses or whatever he was doing, and very quickly, and this was nice. It was nice to see. Unfortunately, of course, people were standing around doing nothing. They're just looking at him. But very quickly, a white guy comes out of the restaurant or wherever he came from, and he grabs the guy and he throws him to the ground and just starts wailing on him. And everybody's just standing around watching this black guy just get beat to the ground. And I thought to myself, good. Well, good. This is a good thing. He's defending not only himself, but he's defending everybody from being victimized by this person who's doing the victimizing. And again, I was just astounded as to the number of people standing around doing nothing. They all look like deer in headlights. But this guy, again, jumps up to the scene and solves the problem immediately. And that's the way that these situations get solved. I mean, again, if an illegal is acting strange, I mean, it's like all the Walmart videos you see of people just losing their minds in Walmart. And again, they're not white people doing it by and large. It's usually blacks. And they're breaking things and throwing things to the ground, and same thing in convenience stores. But again, it's just people reaching into their pockets for their cell phones as they're all just attempting to record it so that they can put it online. Take the person to the ground. Brandish a gun if you have to. Of course, call the police. That should go without saying, but yeah. It's just nuts. The number of people that are willing to put up with complete chaos when it occurs right in front of them, when someone's life is in danger. And everyone's life could potentially be in danger. It blows me away. So there you go. It's my little rant on more social awareness in public situations. I don't know. It's nuts. It's crazy out there, people. It's crazy. Okay. Geopolitical things. Here's a few. Let's see. Biden might not qualify for the ballot in Ohio. This has been making the rounds too. In fact, I saw this last week and I thought, well, this can't be real. So I won't bring it up on the show quite yet, but it keeps making the rounds. So now I'm going to bring it up. This is from AmericanNewsDesk.com. It says Biden might not qualify for ballot in Ohio. This was dated April 7th. It says the following here. It says, while some Democrats are desperate to keep Donald Trump off the November ballot by hook or by crook, it appears that someone at the Democratic National Headquarters got their calendars confused. It says, now, due to a mix-up of dates, Joe Biden may not be on the ballot in Ohio for the general election. Now, there's a bit of a catch in this. I'm going to keep reading this, but ultimately it boils down to whether or not the state officials in Ohio basically kind of want to rewrite their own law and basically give Joe Biden and his so-called candidacy a little bit more slack. So here's what it says more specifically. It says there could be a potential general election ballot access concerns for President Joe Biden in Ohio. The state Secretary of State office said in a letter to Ohio Democrat, God, they keep saying Democratic. It's just awful. They're Democrats. Chair Liz Walters on Friday. It says, in the letter obtained by ABC News, legal counsel for Secretary of State Frank LaRose sought clarification for, quote, an apparent conflict in Ohio law, unquote, between the Democratic National Committee's nominating process and the deadline by which the party's presidential nominee must be certified to the Secretary of State's office. It says the Democratic National Convention is scheduled to convene August 19th, which will take place more than a week after the August 7th deadline to certify a presidential candidate in Ohio. The office flagged according to state code, which would create a problem for Biden's eligibility. Quote, I am left to conclude that the Democratic National Committee must either move up its nominating convention or the Ohio General Assembly must act by May 9th, 2024, 90 days prior to a new law's effective date, to create an exception to the statutory requirement. Legal counsel Paul DeSantis wrote in the letter requesting a quick response on a solution to become compliant with state law. Basically, again, they're not going to keep him off the ballot. That's basically it. Again, they caught them being lazy. They caught them being stupid. Yeah, it's embarrassing for them, but at the exact same time, they're going to let this slide, and they'll let him be on the ballot because they don't want the chaos. They really don't, and they know that a great deal of people aren't going to be able to sign it in because, again, in the state of Ohio, a lot of people, we use the Dominion machines. So we just touch the screen and that's about it. There's really no signing in a candidate, so to speak. So either way, they caught him. They caught him being stupid. They caught him being lazy, which is always fun. But at the same time, they're going to bend their own rules just to make sure that he's on. Because like I said, I just don't think they want the chaos. One more thing here regarding Biden and his fake administration. This is making the rounds also. This was from CNBC. It was titled, Biden's new student loan forgiveness plan could erase up to $20,000 in interest for millions of borrowers. Again, allegedly, all of this is being wiped out. All of this student loan debt that if you've had student loan debt for 20 years or over, and you're still paying on that debt, then all of that debt is now forgiven, and you don't have to pay anymore, and that's it. This violates, if I'm not mistaken, what the Supreme Court ruled, which was that people still had to pay because, well, it's a legal agreement, and that's how legal agreements work. But either way, let me just cut through this rather quickly here. This is who may benefit from the new forgiveness plan. It says, in addition to the cancellation of interest, Biden's new plan is also expected to forgive the debt of certain groups of borrowers, including those who, and there's 4 bullet points here, are already eligible for debt cancellation under an existing government program but haven't yet applied. So there's that group of people. The second one is have been in repayment for 20 years or longer on their undergraduate loans or over 25 years on their graduate loans. The next one, attended school of questionable value. Well, that's interesting. And then the last one, who makes that determination? I didn't like what the school was doing, and they seem suspicious to me. Again, I know that that's been one of those things that's been up in the air for quite some time. And I know that Betsy DeVos's office in the Department of Education when Trump was still there, so to speak, that she was going after this too, fraudulent colleges and things of that nature, degrees that weren't accredited, so on and so forth. I mean, I agree with that. People should receive a refund to some extent. Of course, it begs the question, what happened to due diligence? Didn't these individuals figure out that the degree that they were attaining wasn't accredited in the first place? Apparently not, in many cases. But either way, the last one is are experiencing financial hardship. So apparently, anybody who says that they're either poor or they're not making enough money or whatever it may be, their debt is instantly forgiven. Well, again, I find this to be an election year scam, so to speak. It's just another election year illegal move that he's making in order to, again, garner more votes or whatever it may be. I really don't know how he can get away with it. I don't know how he and Kamala Harris can get away with saying it, let alone doing it. I don't understand. I really don't get it. Okay, education stuff, more of it here. And then again, I have a couple of rather larger things to get into that certainly are jab related, tying specifically, again, to the education field. There has been this story, which I haven't covered yet, but I'm going to bring it up now because I wanted to see sort of how the legalese of this particular situation panned out. And it's remarkably unfortunate, but this was from the Gateway Pundit, so again, my apologies on the reference here. This has to do with Kaylee Gain. And Kaylee Gain is a Missouri teenager who was in a physical altercation and was assaulted and battered by a overweight black girl, and she had her skull beaten into the ground. She's been hospitalized, of course, and has been struggling, as one might expect, after getting their skull fractured. This, of course, is assault and battery. It's felonious assault and battery, and numerous individuals in the state, of course, are trying to get the black female teenager basically charged as an adult, for lack of a better phrase. But here's what it says more specifically. It says, as Missouri teen Kaylee Gain struggles to recover from a March beating, the high school she and her alleged attacker, well, there's nothing alleged about it. It was on film. But anyway, the high school is basically refusing to release records requested by State Attorney General Andrew Bailey. It says, again, it continues here. It says, Bailey is considering charging the teen as an adult, according to the Daily Mail. Again, this Missouri teenager, Kaylee Gain, suffered a skull fracture and a brain bleed that put her in a coma for 2 weeks after the March 8th incident. Gain, who is white, and her alleged attacker, who is black, I don't know why it's alleged, are students at Hazelwood High School in St. Louis, and the attack took place about a mile from the school amid a fight between two groups of teens. Bailey has said that the incident was spawned in the school's DEI-obsessed culture. The Attorney General for the state said that the school district made egregious errors about the incident and said that the district is violating the law by not promptly sharing the records he has requested. Quote, instead of directing your ire at a date reference or making ad hominem attacks, you should follow Missouri law and do so immediately. It then says, Cindy Reeds Ownsby, an attorney representing the school district, wrote in a recent email that Bailey is the problem. She said, quote, it is disappointing to have an attorney general that intentionally disrespects public school district administrators and elected officials by sending error-filled correspondence to intimidate and threaten their leadership. Good God. These people, I'll tell you what, I'm not sure what's worse, a school district or their lawyers. Again, with this story just briefly aside very quickly, the way that they behaved during the entire fake pandemic mask-wearing nonsense, all of these district lawyers, all of them, they all circled the wagons, did they not? I mean, all of them. You would think that alone, as the massive nationwide, worldwide phenomenon that it was, that at least one lawyer, at least one, representing these school districts would have said, wait a minute, let's all just let's all just stop here. The simple fact that everybody's doing the same thing is very suspicious. This is odd. And people have rights and the right to breathe and everything else, and maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we are opening ourselves up for basically a lot of bad attention, lawsuits, and a whole lot of trouble that we don't need. Because at face value, this all looks illegal based on what we're doing. So maybe we should just stop. Maybe we shouldn't do any of this at all. Again, was there a single school district lawyer that stood up and said that at all? It sure didn't seem like it. Not until, again, they were being threatened with, again, the loss of their own insurance and lawsuits and a number of other things. I mean, honest to God. But again, even in a situation like this, when a state attorney general wants documentation, and I know the documentation they clearly want some kind of a discipline record for the black female who did the assaulting. They want to see what this teenager has been up to and whether or not the school district didn't do what they were supposed to do regarding the violation of past rules or regulations, or should they have not even been in the school in the first place. I mean, that's what the state attorney general is digging into. And as you would expect, what is the school district doing? Well, they're protecting themselves. They're attempting to, but you can't. This is freedom of information. This is a freedom of information request to some extent. The only hang-up is that this is a minor. And as a result of that, I mean, your average citizen wouldn't be able to obtain this kind of information, but a lawyer certainly could. Certainly, again, if criminal charges are pressed, then this kind of information has to be admissible, I would think, certainly in any kind of an investigation. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I like to think I am sometimes, but either way, that's the approach that I believe that they're taking. Anyway, it said the following here. It said that Owensby said that the records would be provided by April 15th. Well, great. Then again, why would you have to reply back basically saying that the state attorney general is the problem? It says last week a judge ruled that a certification hearing will be held on May 10th to determine whether the alleged attacker, not alleged, will be tried as an adult, according to USA Today. It says county attorneys sought the delay to accumulate information on the attacker's social and family life. Quote, our position is that she should not be certified, unquote. Defense attorney Greg Smith said, quote, we understand that the law says that there has to be a certification hearing based on what she has been charged with. That's non-negotiable, but our position is she should not be certified. Everything is out there about her being an honor student. She has taken AP courses, and she has no history of juvenile court or with the juvenile court. She has been the victim of bullying. There are other facts we are going to save for court. I bet there are. And you're going to want to save them for court because, again, they've got this gal. They've probably got her dead to rights. She's probably been in trouble before. Whether she's an AP student or not is irrelevant. None of that matters. And again, Kaylee should sue the school district and certainly sue the family into the ground. There's no doubt about it. So she has a disciplinary record. That's exactly what the lawyers are going after, and they should, because it's going to tell a rather horrific story, I bet. And certainly a story of school negligence, we'll call it. And again, that's putting it mildly. She's a black female, and unfortunately, black females can get away with a great deal within school environments, in particular when they're violent. So, yeah, that's the way that goes, unfortunately, but there you have it. Okay, here's another one. And this one, again, I'm going to spend some time on this because this leads into the next story that I have. This, too, by the way, was sent to me by our Virginia professor, who is going to remain anonymous right now, but believe me, they will be on the show, probably at the end of May, if I had to take a guess. And they threw this my way. And just very quickly, in the same way that we listen to people like Ed Dowd paying attention to the insurance rates and the claims that are being made and being filed and a number of other quantitative aspects of the jab and the impact that that's had on people, of course, I would put this next story in line with what is going on with education and how this is, again, one of those red flags in the ground or buoys in the water that is a major marker as to what is contributing here to the collapse of American education and what this actually means for the much larger picture. And there are numerous reasons for this too, which I'll attempt to hit on as much as I can here. This is from InsideHigherEd.com, and it is titled Running Out of Road for FAFSA Completion. The subtitle says the number of students who filled out the federal aid form is down nearly 30%. The ramifications for access and enrollment could be devastating. Now, first of all, as you might expect, Inside Higher Ed as a publication is a left-wing publication. They typically, again, try their best to report on all the positive things in education, so they think, and the fact that they are actually talking about this is, again, more indicative of the collapse here. So here is what it says. It says, quote, in a typical year at Lead Academy High School in Nashville, a college prep-focused charter school, where Kelly Pickowitz, no way I'm saying that right, used to work as a counselor, about 80% of students fill out a free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, F-A-S-F-A. It says this year, with only a few weeks until graduation, that number has dropped to 20%. Quote, it's an actual nightmare, said Kelly, whatever her last name is, who now serves as a scholarship coordinator for the charity nonprofit Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Quote, we're trying to get scholarships out to students, but most of the work I'm doing now is going to local high schools and helping their counselors answer questions about financial aid because they're stretched too thin. Nashville is no outlier. As of March 22nd, only 33.7% of high school seniors had completed a FAFSA, down 28.8% from last year, according to the data from the National College Attainment Network, or NCAN, which has been tracking completion rates throughout this tumultuous financial aid cycle. Says the network estimates that at the going rate, about 500,000 fewer students in the class of 2024 will submit a FAFSA compared to last year. It says, and that's probably an optimistic estimate, says Bill DeBaun, NCAN's Senior Director of Data and Strategic Initiatives. If the pace of completion doesn't pick up, the decline could be closer to 700,000 students. That could translate up to a 4% drop in college goers come fall, DeBaun said, which would be the largest enrollment drop since the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's likely to be made up primarily of low-income and first-generation students. And then they have a line graph here, and it says the estimated percent of seniors submitting a FAFSA high school classes of 2023 and 2024. So the bottom line is 2024, and it looks like as of now, certainly as of March 22nd, it tops out at about 33.7%. So 33.7% of high school seniors this year are applying for financial aid, as opposed to last year when it was 48.3%. Now, again, very quickly, let's go over why this is the case. And there are endless reasons. First of all, the major reason that they're not going to mention, which would make it the major reason because they don't mention it, is that the shot recipients over the last few years, in particular if you were a high school student, you're probably very ill, if not dead. And if you're ill, in particular, I would say in a more severe way, as a result of course, the shot taking, then you have medical bills. And if medical bills are piling up, going to college and applying for financial aid through the government is not likely to occur. It doesn't matter if Joe Biden eliminates the debt of individuals who, again, are still paying off debt from 20 years ago or not. That has no impact on these younger individuals who, again, were coerced into taking these shots one way or another and are now experiencing the pinch and the pain that comes with all of that. And then, of course, every business that those individuals touch is going to have a negative impact on the business as a whole because why? Well, the business requires their participation. It requires attendance. And without attendance, well, there is no business anymore, certainly in the education business. Now, again, people would also say, well, it's lowered income among families and people are having less children. And that's why all of this is also happening because, again, very rarely are you going to find a family with 2, 3, 4, or 5 children where they're all going to college and they all want to apply for financial aid in some way. And college is the number one choice, clearly, that everybody needs to be, participating in. I mean, all of those things basically aren't happening anymore. So yes, there is a unfortunate drop in child rearing and reproduction. We know that for a fact. And that largely, unfortunately, is driven by the economy. And of course, as we know, the thing that crushed the economy was the fake pandemic and the gaslighting of this entire psychological operation that is a depopulation agenda. I mean, in the long line of dominoes that are all stacked up, that was the first one to get hit. And then all these other dominoes now are falling, and they can't for the life of them figure out why. Well, it was just the pandemic, everybody, and that had an impact on all of us. No, 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 no. No, there's no pandemic. It was a biological weapon that you took believing that it was the preventative medicine for something that actually doesn't exist. And I'm telling you, their inability, and it is a flat out inability to accept that fact, that is what is going to crumble higher education and certainly K-12 education. These institutions are not recognizing the truth and that they went along with, in lockstep, with a massive lie, and a deadly one at that. But as I've said numerous times, if they don't admit that they got it wrong, and they're not going to, then nothing will get fixed. You cannot reverse this ship. It's just, it's too late. It goes on here, it says, state leaders, advocacy organizations, and higher ed institutions are rallying students to submit their FAFSAs as fast as possible. And high schools are doing all they can to answer the call. But with counselors stretched thin, why are they stretched thin? Bioweapon shot, maybe? In less than 2 months until high school graduation season, time is running out. Quote, I've been sounding the alarm about this for months, said Angel Perez, president of the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. Quote, we've already lost so many students during COVID. Losing another 500,000 to the FAFSA has grave implications. Oh, it most certainly does. And what a choice of words, grave implications. And what do you mean you lost so many students during COVID? What do you mean by lost? You mean jabbed and dead, or do you mean, well, they just chose to not go to school? There are a variety of reasons here, and again, they're not going to admit the real problems. It continues here. It says, Jacqueline Perino, National CEO of UAspire, a nonprofit that works to boost college going among underdeserved populations, says she's trying to stay optimistic, but as issues with the form remain unsolved, and Department of Education errors pile up, she's seen a lot of burnout too. Quote, we need to keep beating the drum to get FAFSA completion up. But it's tiring and taxing for counselors who are already overworked, and students aren't feeling like the system is there for them, she said. Quote, if I'm being honest, I don't think we're going to recover to anywhere near last year's numbers, and we'll probably continue to see maybe even a double-dip drop in enrollment, mainly from low-income and first-gen students of color. There you go. Because it's all about race. But she has a point. I mean, she's right. If low-income individuals happen to not be white and they don't want to go to college anymore, and they don't want to apply for federal assistance, well, I mean, they're not going to. They'd rather just graduate from high school and then go get a job someplace. And again, it's probably not going to be a high-paying job. It'll be minimum wage, and that'll be that. But of course, what she also doesn't understand is that the money that comes from numerous families, regardless of race, I mean, even white students aren't attending college anymore the way that they used to. Again, yes, the last 4 years and the psyop of the last 4 years pretty much did it all in. And I mean, again, a lot of people have learned, is it worth it? They're taking their degrees, they're going into the workplace, and then they're turning around, they're looking backwards, and they're saying, wait a minute, that degree didn't do anything for me. I mean, even people who were in my profession of education, I entered college knowing I was going to be a school teacher. I knew it. I mean, my 4 years in college, well, it was 5 years, was basically job training. The fact is that's not the case with many individuals who are in college, regardless of their major. Again, many individuals, again, regardless of major, don't end up doing the thing that they say that they want to do when they're in college. Some of them do, clearly, and I'm sure plenty of them do, but there are plenty who do not. And again, they graduate, they turn around, and they ask themselves, wait a minute, is the job that I have now and the thing I'm doing now, is that really dependent on the thing that I studied in school? And in many cases, the answer is no. So I think it would be absolutely hilarious to be a high school counselor in this day and age now. With a biological weapon that is in play that is ruining everyone's business to some extent and certainly putting a strain on numerous businesses, including, of course, money acquisition and earning money and then where that money ends up going. I mean, it's all connected here and it's all crumbling. But again, they just blindly blame COVID. Well, the pandemic was tough and blah, blah, blah. No. It was your participation in it. That's what caused all of this. If everybody just kept going to school and kept going to work and kept doing what they were doing, we wouldn't be here. Anyway, this article continues. It says, crisis begets crisis. Some states have struggled more than others to boost their FAFSA completion, especially those with high average student-to-counselor ratios. Southern states' completion rates have fallen the furthest on average. Sean Kennedy, president of the Southern Association for College Admission Counseling, a professional association for college counselors covering the southeastern United States, said that the completion rate is down by at least 25% in every state in his territory. West Virginia and Mississippi are down 35% year over year. Yeah. Yep. The other thing I hope you're picking up in this are all of these associations and education conglomerates that are all working with one another and constantly communicating and scheming and meddling and balancing numbers and doing this and doing that. I mean, I'm telling you, the education business, ladies and gentlemen, is so dirty and it's so thick that it just exists in the smallest crevices of our country, and you might not even imagine. It goes on here. It says Tennessee high schools have an average of one counselor for every 420 students, far higher than the American School Counselor Association's recommended ratio of 250 to 1. Jesus, what a nightmare. It says, despite that disadvantage, the state worked hard for years to get FAFSA completion up, largely by making it an eligibility requirement for the Tennessee Promise State Scholarship Program. This time last year, Tennessee boasted the highest completion rate in the country, with nearly 80% of students filling out the form by mid-April. This year, completion is down to 40% of high school students, a decline of 43.7 points. The largest year-over-year drop of any state. State education leaders are urging students to get their forms in soon. This past week was, quote, finish the FAFSA week in Tennessee, but it may be too late to make up more than a small slice of the decline. There's another reason here why these aren't being filled out also, which is something that I've brought up in the past, which this exact professor has brought to my attention also, which is that numerous colleges and universities, of course, are dropping and eliminating not only tuition, but all of the predetermined parameters that they had in place in order to even attend the college or the university. I mean, they're dumbing everything down. And if you have free tuition that's being offered to people, which is certainly the case in numerous colleges and universities, with, of course, certain circumstances and elements that have to be followed in order to receive free tuition, which is like you have to live on campus for 3 out of the 4 years. You still have to pay class fees and all that other stuff, but your tuition is waived. I mean, if your tuition is waived, why even fill one of these FAFSA forms out? There'd be no need. Why even apply for a scholarship? There would be no need. It goes on here. It says, Pietkowitz blames the nosedive on deep frustration among families over the rollout of the new FAFSA. Her organization removed FAFSA completion as a requirement to qualify for scholarships last summer, when delays in the new form's launch first raised concerns. But most students who need aid to afford college must fill it out anyway, it says. And Pietkowitz worries they won't do so in time. Maybe it's because they don't want to. Maybe it's because they don't want to go to college anymore. Maybe it's because numerous families not only can't afford it, but they know that it's useless. This, again, is one of the things that this whole bureaucratic nightmare and these bureaucrats just don't understand. They make all these policies, procedures, steps, and evaluations and forms that they all have to fill out. They're making work for themselves, not knowing that all of this is hanging by a thread. And as soon as that thread is pulled, everything falls to the ground. And then, of course, they scream victim, and they act like they had nothing to do with it. It says the consequences of the plummeting completion rates are already becoming clear. A former Community Foundation scholarship recipient who Pietkowitz has stayed in touch with said her younger sister decided not to go to college this year because of her frustration with the FAFSA. I bet that wasn't the only reason. They said, quote, she's not the only one. It's happening all over the state, where students and families are looking at the chaos and calculating the time and energy they need to invest and concluding that it's just not worth it. Well, I'm sure that filling out all the paperwork is timely and, probably not enjoyable by any stretch of the imagination. But again, let's face it, this probably isn't the only reason. There are endless reasons. Hell, there are colleges that still have jab requirements. You still have to be jabbed to attend. Not all of them, of course. I mean, what are we down to? Maybe like 36 or 50, somewhere around there. Again, it was almost all of them at one point. It says here, losing steam. In recent weeks, progress has actually slowed rather than picked up. At the end of February, FAFSA completion was going up by almost 3% per week, according to data NCAN provided. A month later, that pace had slowed to 1.4%, and it appears unlikely to pick up without some kind of intervention. Quote, we expect a long tail for FAFSA submissions into the summer, but high schools won't be open to help students by then, DeBond said. Quote, we need to make this happen now. While high school seniors are still an invested, captive audience, we're running out of road. Oh, this isn't the only road that you're running out of. This isn't it. This is just a piece. It says Kennedy believes the lack of progress in making up for lost time comes from a kind of FAFSA fatigue. The longer it takes you to get over the obstacles to completion, the harder it is for students and families to see it through to the end. It goes on here. It says students with non-citizen parents have had perhaps the greatest difficulties completing the form. When the new FAFSA launched in January, a technical glitch did not allow students to progress without entering a parent's social security number. 4 months later, the Department of Education has yet to fully fix the issue, though officials have introduced a workaround. Perino said that students with undocumented parents are fast losing patience. She believes those students represent a large portion of those who've given up on the form. Good. Good. And what typical education fashion to put together something so complex and not have the ability for a student whose parents are not natural-born citizens here, who don't have a social security number, to actually require a social security number and then stopping the whole process as a result. I mean, they can't even think past the palm in front of their face. That's the education business in a nutshell right there. No doubt about it. It then says in California, where close to 11% of the population is composed of mixed status families, FAFSA completion has dropped by 105,860 students, or 36.6%, second only to Tennessee in the extent of its decline. Texas and Nevada, states with similarly high proportions of mixed status residents, are also near the bottom of the list with over 34% declines each. It says, quote, for some families, often white middle-class ones, the FAFSA form has been their easiest to fill ever. It's the department and college side that's been complicated. But many of the most vulnerable students have really had to fight to complete it, and they just don't have the energy to keep fighting on every front like this. I've never filled one of these forms out, and frankly, I've never even seen one of these forms. But isn't it interesting that it's apparently all the minority students that are having the hardest time here? It says Perez said that the completion crisis could have a serious impact on higher ed enrollments and colleges' finances, as the pandemic did. Here it comes. They actually say this. I love it. They said, quote, it's just as bad as COVID, Perez said, maybe worse. Because the difference between COVID and now is there is an influx of funding to offset the impact of the pandemic. I'm not seeing any talk about that now. I don't even know what that means. I just know that you have jabbed, sick, and dying people, and families are having to rework everything that they do. And yeah, going to college now and filling out all the forms, including financial aid, isn't one of the things they want to do. It says financial assistance from the federal government could help. Because of the many delays in the FAFSA rollout, high school students will likely be trying to fill out FAFSA into the summer months. Perino said that districts like Los Angeles Unified have told her that they want to make counselors and other resources available for those students, but don't have the money to pay them past the end of the school year. That's where federal funding could supplement district budgets, and considering the U.S. Department of Education is to blame for the FAFSA mess, Perino thinks it's a more than reasonable request. It almost wraps up here, and it says, quote, really, this is on the federal state aid office, they said. We want to be partners and support high schools however we can, but students and counselors can't just work around the challenges. Unless we all wake up tomorrow and the FAFSA is completely fixed and the ISIRs are being processed at a clip of 20,000 a day, we will have significant enrollment declines. Yeah, but it's not just because they can't fill out the paperwork. Again, it's because they don't want to. It's because they can't afford it. It's because there's no interest in college the way that there once was. It's just not there anymore. And people are learning this, and they're also learning it online. It wraps up here, and it says, regardless of support from state and federal actors, Pietkowitz said the completion crisis belies a more serious, potentially longer standing issue, the loss of trust in the federal financial aid system. At a time when the cost of college is eating away at Americans' confidence in the value of a post-secondary education, it could sour the public's outlook on college for years to come. And there it is. It took them the whole article to actually say part of the major problem. One sentence at the very end. Incredible. It wraps up and it says, quote, the damage done to the foundational trust in FAFSA and in the financial aid system in general won't just impact this class. Pietkowitz said, it will trickle down. I'm afraid this is going to have a long tail and we're only just seeing the effects, unquote. You're finished. It's over. And it's got nothing to do with people not wanting to fill out paperwork, and it's got nothing to do with your online submission forms and submission access database not working properly. No. This is because people are jabbed, they're learning, they're sick, they're dead, they don't have the money to attend, they don't even want to bother with financial aid. And endless people who have gone to colleges and universities are doing exactly what I said at the beginning. They're turning around, they're looking at their degrees, and they're going, that was a waste of time. That was useless. And of course, what are we seeing regarding the enrollment parameters? They're all dropping their enrollment parameters because they're starving for students. They're starving for them. No SAT, no ACT. As long as you have a heartbeat. Do you have a pulse? Congratulations, you're in. Free tuition. The first 2 years are free. Free room and board. Whatever it may be. Again, low GPA. Like I said in Northern Kentucky University, if you have a GPA of 2.75 or higher, you're in. It's that simple. You can be a C high school student and be openly admitted into a university in Kentucky. Okay, great. Can you afford it? I mean, again, congratulations on getting in, but now can you afford it? And do you want to go through this whole rigmarole of filling out all this federal aid and all these federal aid forms? Many people don't. They don't want to do it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads me to this now. This was the second article that they sent my way. Again, from Inside Higher Ed, it was titled, Wisconsin College Teeters on the Brink, in Public. It says, Northland College announced a potential closure last month, hoping to spark last-minute fundraising to save itself. It hasn't worked so far. No kidding. Remember, this is a little side note here before I get into this one. And again, you talk about rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic. That's exactly what this college is doing and what these administrators are doing. But do you remember a while back when I was bringing up the business of turning these college campuses and basically these buildings into mental institutions, and how they sort of already look like mental institutions? And at the exact same time, those of us who are awake in society, that we are actually clamoring for there to be more mental institutions, where we take these brain-dead leftists who, don't know how to tie their own shoes and dress up like they're cats and fall for the latest craze and, whatever the most popular thing is, and stare into their cell phone all day long like a zombie. I mean, we have an opportunity here, ladies and gentlemen. There's a real opportunity to, quote unquote, repurpose these campuses and actually turn them into full-blown mental institutions. And I mean, actual ones, not ones where they just brainwash people like what they're doing now. Either way, here's what this Wisconsin college is doing or attempting to do, and of course, it's not working. It says Northland College is the latest example of a growing phenomenon, higher education institutions deciding their future in quasi-public view. See, the very simple fact that they're having to publicize their problems is amazing. And the fact that Inside Higher Ed is covering this is also indicative of the collapse. It says 3 weeks ago, the Wisconsin private nonprofit college suddenly announced that it would be forced to close by year's end if it couldn't find a $12 million lifeline by April 3rd. The revelation seemingly shocked students, faculty, and staff members and alumni. It says last week, the deadline came and went, and despite falling about $10.5 million short of its $12 million target, the college didn't close. Instead, the board on Thursday declared financial exigency and granted a 2-week reprieve to explore possible programs, staffing, and budget adjustments that could preserve the institution's long-term viability. Good luck. It says employee and alumni groups who say they were blindsided by Northland's original announcement and complain that college leaders had not involved them in discussions about a path forward, had pleaded for more time. They floated a proposal, True Northland, as a financially sustainable way to keep the college open. It would involve turning empty campus dorms into affordable public housing in a lakeside town where housing prices have skyrocketed, cutting some faculty positions and reassigning others to roles such as grant writers, adjusting curriculum to lower operational costs, and broadening the college's mission to increase lucrative community engagement. Jesus. They're trying to turn the college into a flippin' commune. This is insane. fill it with illegals, dumb down the curriculum. That'll cause endless people to show up. And then we'll just make everybody a grant writer if we can, so that they can seek out funding to then bring the money back to us. They went from being some kind of a college, and probably a very terrible one at that, in the blink of an eye, to just becoming basically a homeless camp for illegal aliens and God knows what else. This is nuts. It says the college president and board chair say they had received and considered the plan relatively early in the initial 3-week fundraising period, but true Northland representatives say they didn't get a chance to fully present and discuss their model until after the April 3rd deadline. And announcing, it says, the extension, Northland leaders offered a ray of hope. Quote, there have been positive and productive conversations taking place among the board, leadership, faculty, and campus groups, as well as the community. President Chad Dayton said in a press release, we are listening and agree that additional time and a defined process are valuable next steps, unquote. It says, but they also continue to sound a note of caution. Quote, our shared goal is to continue Northland's mission, and we are committed to ensuring we've explored all options to do so, Ted Bristol, chair of the board, said in the same release. Quote, however, I also want to caution that Northland's circumstances remain incredibly serious and significant progress will be needed in the next 2 weeks to avoid closure. Now, what did you all do 4 years ago? I mean, let's take a guess. What game did you all play 4 years ago that got you to this point? Again, the excuses that these people have made probably is astounding. And it shouldn't surprise anybody. The institutions that have the least amount of money, the lowest enrollment, these are the ones that are going to be washed up first. There's no doubt about that. But just because these small ones are crumbling, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't mean that the big ones aren't crumbling either. You've heard me say it here regarding Miami University. They're in the tank when it comes to enrollment. All you have to do is drive around. There's no one here. And I'm shocked anybody's showing up, frankly, but there's nobody here. You've heard Dr. Robin McCutcheon at Marshall say the same thing. Enrollment is sparse. And they're going to basically an all-online environment, certainly within their business school, because they're having a hard time getting butts in seats. Because there are no butts anymore. They're all jabbed. Or they just don't want to go. It then says, a risk or a reward. It says, similar situations have not ended well for the college. Bloomfield College, a small private liberal arts institution in New Jersey, that primarily serves Black and Hispanic students, made a parallel public plea for help in 2021 as it faced threats of closure, but the cry for donors' dollars was to no avail. A year later, in the fall of 2022, Bloomfield announced it would merge with Montclair State, a medium-sized public research university about 10 miles away. That was a positive outcome for many students and staff members, even if the institution didn't survive as a freestanding institution. When Bloomfield first made its financial strains public, legal experts who often advise university consolidations of colleges noted that such public announcements come with risks. Both incoming and returning students may be less likely to enroll if they are unsure they can graduate before the college closes, they said. That's great. That, I have to tell you, that admission right there is priceless. That's worth everything to me. They openly just said that they want to keep things a secret from people because they don't want anybody to know that they're insolvent, or that they might be, or that they're going insolvent, or that they're a shitty place to be in the first place. They're openly telling you that they try to keep things like this under wraps because they don't want people to find out the hard way. They don't care if people find out the hard way. That's what this is also saying. Well, we just want them here. Yes, if we collapse while they're here, well, too bad for them. but we just want them here. And as long as we can get them here for that first year, well, then we've got them, and that's exactly where we want them. Holy hell, ladies and gentlemen. You send your kids to these places, and they're lying to everybody. This is incredible. It says, yet even knowing this, such pleas seem to become increasingly common as college and university leaders see no other option and hope that the news of a closure could light a fire under students, faculty, alumni, and philanthropists, sparking just the kind of investment necessary to keep the college alive. What philanthropist would want to invest or donate to any of these institutions? Which one? They'd have to be equally as brainwashed. It says, will 2 weeks be enough? It says, in the case of Northland, a 132-year-old college known for its emphasis on environmental sustainability, well, there's your first problem. Financial sustainability, it says, has long been a struggle. The irony. Tax filings in 2022 show that the college had nearly $35.1 million in expenses and $31.8 million in revenues, a shortfall of roughly $3.3 million. And reporting from ProPublica shows that Northland had been operating in a similar red zone since 2016. Yeah, because you're dumbasses. You're offering something that no one can use, and what you're offering is a garbage product. It says the college has also seen nearly 20% decrease in enrollment between its peak of 645 students in the fall of 2017 and 518 students in 2022. Data from the Department of Education's Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System shows. Faculty members and alums say that they had some sense that the college was struggling, but that no one knew just how dire it was until the March 11th announcement. Well, you're all brain dead then. You're all asleep at the wheel. How's that working out for everybody? I'm going to skip to the end of this, and here's what the last one says. Again, leave it to these leftists to bring emotions into the equation. Please keep everybody's emotions in mind here. It says, quote, while we are pleased that the Board of Trustees did not announce closure, we need to acknowledge the emotional and mental impact of the timing of this announcement. The past 3 weeks have been very stressful for the campus community, and a 2-week extension without any promise of being open for the coming academic year is prolonging the anxiety and uncertainty many are feeling. Unquote. And goodbye. So they're done. There goes another college. Yeah, it's a bad business model. And when you all take the bait and you all fall for a horrible business venture, like the COVID pandemic, quote unquote, and you believe it hook, line, and sinker, and no one stopped to think to themselves, wait a minute, maybe we could actually profit off of this. We could actually profit from this, not with CARES Act money, but we could actually profit by not doing what everybody else is doing. If everybody else is closing, we'll stay open. We'll make money hand over fist. If everybody's losing enrollment, we'll gain enrollment because we'll, maybe drop our costs a little bit, and then we'll just open it up to more people. Maybe we can even build a new building and hire more people. But this isn't what they do. All of these businesses, all these universities, schools, institutions, they all did the same thing. And now they're all feeling it, and they deserve it. I love it. I just love it. Okay, jab-related stuff. I have 2 quick stories. First, again, another contribution from this wonderful Virginia professor. They sent me this, and the irony is astounding. This is one of their students or former students whose parent released this email to her professors. And this is the exact same diagnosis that Lauren Boebert was given, ironically enough. Now, is this student jabbed? My money is on yes. But anyway, here's a part of this email. And it's cut off, so this isn't the full email. But it does allude to, at the very beginning, it says medical center with a blood clot. And then it says she has been complaining of back pain for a few weeks. So when she came home to Florida for spring break, we took the opportunity to have her checked out. As it turns out, she has been diagnosed with May-Thurner syndrome and had a large blood clot in her iliac crest. Surgeons successfully removed the clot this afternoon and enlarged the vein with a balloon. She will now require some stabilization period to become adequately anticoagulated before returning to school. When we first got to the hospital, doctors pushed hairpin to break up the clot. It says we quickly discovered that she was allergic to hairpin. She's been diagnosed with hairpin-induced thrombocytopenia, or HIT, which has significantly delayed her treatment and will complicate her recovery. She will, of course, get a letter from the hospital, but would like to ask for any grace with her attendance and any work and accommodations that blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, my question is the following. How many doctors are receiving emails now about May-Thurner syndrome that any individual, regardless of age, is showing up to their doctor's office or hospital with pain, they're being diagnosed with a blood clot, and then they're saying, well, it's May-Thurner syndrome. Normally people like you wouldn't get clots, so it's this condition then, quote unquote. I'm telling you, I would almost go so far as to say this could be another Substack article, but if I was a betting man, I'm certainly a decent guesser. I would say that May-Thurner syndrome is being widely discussed among hospitals and doctors' offices across the nation, if not the world, and that all of these so-called victims or patients who claim to have May-Thurner syndrome are all jabbed. Again, this is the fraud of the medical industry, is that they're just saying that the reason that a person has something is because of this condition. Well, it's just a random condition that popped up out of nowhere. And we don't have an explanation, but we do know it has a name, and because it has a name, there's a treatment and blah, blah, blah. What's the one thing that they all have in common? And of course, what's the one thing they're never discussing? You can see how this, I mean, what a time. What an absolute, I'm rubbing my face here. What a time. What a time this is. To have this singular thread run through all facets of our society, and yet the vast majority of them cannot figure out for the life of them what the cause is. Honest to God. They don't get it. And these are the people claiming that they're going to fix the problem. And yet they don't know what the real problem is. It's like what I said in the last Substack article. You know, these K-12 schools are pushing nothing but mental health. Mental health, mental health, mental health. We need more mental health services. You're a mental health institution. I mean, the inmates are running the asylum. They're all the employees. You can't be the savior of any mental health when you're negative mental health, rather, when you're the ones causing the mental health problems. You're the ones causing it. And your inability to think and problem solve and apply the scientific method to all aspects of your life is the reason why you're in the situation you're in. I mean, I feel terrible for this student, clearly, but my God, they're not the only one. That's not the only college student that has blood clots and can't figure out why. This is happening all over the place. So much like I warned about IgG4, whenever that was, approximately a year ago maybe, if that, keep an eye out here for May-Thurner syndrome and how often you hear about this. Again, this is going to be one of those sort of awareness tests now. Now that I'm starting to hear about this more, and certainly twice within the last week, this has got to be one of those conditions that's now being widely diagnosed among the jab. They're not just saying blood clots. That's not good enough. They need a more viable explanation, so they think. So that's why they give it a condition name. or a syndrome name. Which, by the way, what's the S in AIDS stand for? Syndromes. What's the S in VAIDS stand for? Syndromes. So here's your VAIDS. Here's your AIDS. It's right here. Unbelievable. Here's one more that's unbelievable. I can't even believe I'm reading this. This is from Fox Business. April 8th. Hand sanitizer, aloe gel, recalled over warnings it could cause comas or blindness. What is happening? What is happening? The fake COVID tests have been recalled and people still use them. Now hand sanitizer is being recalled. And people won't know this either. They'll just keep using it. Remember all the hand sanitizer craziness? You had all these companies that used to do one thing, like we used to be a pizza shop and we were a restaurant and we served all kinds of pizza on a daily basis, but then COVID shut our business down. Then we decided to start making hand sanitizer instead and save the world. Hand sanitizer has always been poison. It's always poison. It's loaded with endless chemicals, copious amounts of alcohol. People drink it in prison to get drunk. I even recall an old episode of Intervention, that A&E television show. I used to show that in my health education and anatomy and physiology classes when I taught. Students liked it. I mean, it was fascinating. But there was one guy, he was a full-blown alcoholic, and he would pump hand sanitizer when he was in the hospital from the hand sanitizer dispensers into a styrofoam cup, pour ice and water on top of it, and drink it and get loaded. I mean, my God. And then the number of kids, of course, on a day-in and day-out basis in K-12 schools who were forced to use that constantly. Oh, you're coming in from outside. Don't forget your hand sanitizer. Oh, you just touch the doorknob. Make sure and sanitize your hands again. It's nuts. I might even have some of those testimonies in my last book where, again, parents were coming, picking up their kids from school and saying, my child's hands are red raw and the skin is falling off. Yeah, hand sanitizer. But are we going to get an apology from these people in these institutions? No, that's not going to happen. It says several lots of hand sanitizer and aloe gel are being recalled for containing methanol, which can put consumers at risk for serious health issues, according to federal health officials. The recall affects 40 lots of Aruba aloe hand sanitizer gel, alcohol 80%, and Aruba aloe alcoholida gel, if I'm saying that correctly, which I believe I am, oddly enough. It says alcohol denaturated with methanol, according to a notice posted by the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA. The FDA warned in a recent recall that substantial methanol exposure can cause nausea, vomiting, headaches, blurred vision, coma, seizures, permanent blindness, as well as permanent damage to the central nervous system or death. Lawsuits? Anybody? Any K-12 lawsuits for all the giant vats of hand sanitizer that were just gooped on children's hands on a day in and day out basis? And again, there's no way that these are the only two kinds of hand sanitizer that are being recalled, or that these are the only two kinds of hand sanitizer that have these chemicals in them. They all do. They're all poison. It says the Aruba aloe alcoholida gel, which is used for temporary relief of pain and itching associated with minor burns, sunburn, insect bites, or minor skin irritations, is packaged in two sizes, a 2.2 full ounce plastic bottle and an 8.5 full ounce plastic bottle. The bottles are transparent with labels that read in part, Alcoholida Gel Pain Relieving Gel, 0.5% lidocaine hydrochloride. Great. It says, during the pandemic, the FDA created a list of over 600 potential dangerous hand sanitizers after discovering an uptick in the number of sanitizers that had been made with methanol rather than the approved ethyl alcohol. Methanol is commonly used in industrial settings but is not safe for use on the skin. It is also dangerous if it is ingested. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. American K-12 schools are the safest place for your children, and their safety and security is our number one concern. Don't hold your breath for any kind of apology. I don't think it's ever going to happen regarding any of this. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you again for listening. I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.